Hello and welcome to Super OK, where we try to do a decent enough job to entertain people with our opinions on video games. I am your host, Zando. For once, it's not Dale, but Dale is with me.
Woo!
Woo! And Kevin's not here for once, so we're breaking up the formula a little bit.
Yeah.
For once, I'm not dying and or sleeping, and so we're here to talk about video games. And so we'll just real quick ask you how you're doing. I just told you were here, and I feel like I didn't even check in with you yet. How are you doing?
You know, I'm doing well. I'm incredibly excited to be having a conversation with you. It's been a little bit since you've been able to be on, so I'm glad that you are you're good.
Yeah, I had a day where I had to work a straight up 14-hour shift, and I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I was fighting off the flu at the same time. So that messed me up for a good long time.
Yeah, that's going to get you real jacked up there. Are you at 100% now or close to?
I would say I'm close to 100%. Yeah, I'm just still sleepy all the time, but that just comes with working a lot. But
that's my default, man.
Because I'm enjoying the work. So it does still feel like work, but I'm enjoying it, which is a nice change.
Good.
But
good.
We're not a work podcast. We're a video game podcast. But before we start talking about video games, we'd like to talk about our highlight of the week, where we just talk about something that has made our days recently a little bit better, brighter, happier, all those kind of fun things. So, Dale, why don't you start off? You tell us your highlight of the week.
Yeah. So I, much like Zando, have been sick for the last several weeks. Not as bad as Zando, but bad. And they wouldn't give me antibiotics until I hit the 2-week mark of being ill. Something about like super bugs during COVID or some crazy shit. And so I finished all of my antibiotics earlier this week. I'm feeling much better. Aside from like the fact that I'm tired, and as I said, that's just my default. So maybe that's just normal.
We are old dudes.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of a lingering cough left. So I apologize if any of that comes through on the podcast. But other than that, I am doing so much better, and that is so important because Ange and I are going on vacation tomorrow, and I really didn't want to go on vacation sick. She's still sick, but there's nothing I can do about that. That is my highlight of the week, that I am finally real close to 100%. I am very excited about it.
And that really should be all of our highlights of the week, that you're feeling better. Because
Thanks, man.
Sick Dale's not good. We don't want that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. But I don't believe you. What is your highlight of the week?
I mean, in addition to you feeling better, so recently my 3-year-old son, Benjamin, has been real curious about the picture that's on the back of my phone, which is an old promotional, it's like in the instruction manual for Mega Man 3 of like all of the Mega Man bosses from Mega Man 1 through 3, all kind of clumped together, taking a friendly picture together. And he has recently been kind of asking like, hey, who is that? What is that picture? I want to see that picture. And so I will like zoom in and I'll be like showing him all the guys and be like, who's this? I was like, oh, this is Snake Man. Who's this? Oh, it's Cut Man. And he's been able to identify them. And then he's like slowly become more and more obsessed. So I've got this little like Mega Man Robot Master handbook. I've got a complete like coffee table book of Mega Man stuff. And so we've been going through that at bedtime. And then this past Saturday, we just had like a real chill, easy day. And Ben was asking me about Mega Man stuff because I had a new Mega Man shirt on. He's asking me about all the guys. And we found Mega Man Upon a Star, which is like an old OVA anime of Mega Man, and it's cool. Like really cutesy, and like it's not like we tried to watch the Ruby Spears one where it's like, super fighting robot, and it's like super cheesy and like they're just hurling insults at each other all the time because it's like a 90s American cartoon. So I tracked down this Mega Man Upon a Star, and it's a real cutesy kind of story, and like Dr. Wily gets out of the game world and is wreaking havoc on Tokyo, and Mega Man goes and it has to stop him. And Ben loved it. He's just like sitting on the couch, full attention, eating a bag of Doritos, like just absolutely loving it. So it was really cool to just like see him love my obsession and getting into it.
That's awesome. That is very, very cool. I'm glad that he is loving that. Have you ever shown him the like weird concept art where Mega Man looks just like a regular human? Because that is real crazy and would probably make him hate it. So basically what I'm saying is like,
Yeah.
stay away from this.
Yeah, the box art from the original Mega Man has not entered his world yet, nor
Yeah.
has the European cover for Mega Man 2. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
You should give that one a quick juggle. It's like, so it's better than that one. Like, it's not like bad artwork, but it's like really cheesy 80s artwork
Is
where
he
Mega Man
holding a
is all
gun?
silver for some reason.
Oh yeah, this is real wild.
It like looks like a weird sci-fi movie from the late, or rather the early 80s, and it looks awesome.
There's like a dragon,
Uh-huh.
and the bottom half of his body is a surfboard.
Yep. He's like a real Silver Surfer Mega Man kind of thing.
This is real bizarre. I kind of love it.
Yeah, it's the ET recently had a thing where they were, I think it was this one. They had made that into a poster, and I almost bought it, but I was like, man, $35 is pretty steep for a poster.
Yeah, it is.
But
That's
it
just
was
paper
pretty
and
great
ink, man.
artwork.
Yeah.
There's some real bad Mega Man artwork, but so far, no, I have not done that. Did you see sorry, the last Mega Man artwork thing, and then we'll move on.
You're fine.
Did you see they also, for Mega Man 9 and Mega Man 10, they made like old school style bad artwork Mega Man covers that were actually awesome? Like the Mega Man 10 one has like Proto Man and Mega Man back to back, and it's so cool looking. If they made that Mega Man 10 poster, I would absolutely buy it.
Oh, I'm looking it up. Yeah, this is pretty wild.
Yeah. I know this is an audio podcast, and if you're driving in your car, I apologize, as Dale and I are just Googling images and talking about how cool they are. But when you get to your destination, maybe just real quick, look up Google Mega Man weird box art covers.
Yeah, and if you're in the Patreon, you can just check it out in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put the links in there.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were talking about video games, so that's okay, because we are a video game podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But Mega Man's been around for a long time. You know what else has been around for a long time?
What's
Not
that?
English that I'm speaking. The Super Nintendo. In the summer of 1991, the U.S. was blessed with the release of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, or as some folks will say, the SNES. And Nintendo officially entered the 16-bit era of video gaming. It had a wonderful library of games, many of which are still praised to this day as being some of the greatest video games ever made. And it also set the standard for gaming controllers with its 4 face buttons on the right side, as well as introducing the world to the concept of left and right shoulder buttons. So let's take a look at how yellowed our own plastic is as we reminisce on what might be at least one of the Super OK hosts hails as their favorite video game system, the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Dale, did you own a Super Nintendo, or were you just sad through most of the 90s?
Both.
Yeah?
Yeah. It turns
How do
out
you do both?
Well, first off, sad boy. But I didn't get my Super NES until like 1996. Which was a year after the PlayStation came out, and I only got it because I bought it off of my friend Matt, and he had gotten a PlayStation for Christmas. And so I bought it from him for $100. It came with some real bangers and some real crap games. But some of those are, my favorite games to this day. And so I did not have one for the first 5 years that the SNES was out, which really shaped my understanding of and the games that I played on it. But man, some of those games, absolute classics. Real quick before you answer this question, though, you said some call the SNES. Do you prefer to SNES? Is that you, or are you a SNES man?
I always thought that calling it the NES and the SNES just sounded weird. I don't know why. And so I just always, I grew up calling it the Super Nintendo. So that's just how it rolls off my tongue. I don't feel the need to abbreviate it. So yeah, I just
You're not breathing at all?
Not really. I just say Super Nintendo. Or like back in the day, I would just say, oh, this is for Super. That's how I would abbreviate in the early 90s. Would say it's for
This
super.
is for super is wild. I love it.
Yep.
I love it. All right. Sorry. What about you? Did you get a SNES the day it came out, or were you like a 5 years late boy like me?
I was not a day it came out, and I remember being real sad about it. But I got one for Christmas of 91, so I only had to wait a
Okay.
couple months.
Yeah.
But man, what a grueling few months. I would see it in the stores and want it so bad. There was one time where my brother's 8 years older than I am. He took me to a friend of his who had a Super Nintendo just so I could play it for a little bit, and that was glorious. But I remember specifically there was an old episode of Roseanne. My mom like loved watching Roseanne, and
Okay.
like very early in the run, their youngest kid on that show got a Super Nintendo, and I was so jealous of that fictional character because he's sitting
That's
there playing
amazing.
Super Mario World, and I'm like, that should be me. I want that Super Nintendo. That's like a weird visceral memory that I actually have
Of just
being pissed
hating
at a
DJ.
TV show. Yep, I was so mad at DJ for having a Super Nintendo.
Oh man,
But
that's
Christmas
great.
of 91, I had a package under the tree, and I remember the note said to Matt from Santa, and I was so excited that that's what I got. My parents also got me this weird old timey like metal school desk,
Okay.
like a gigantic, like where it's like the desk and the chair are all attached and are one thing. And I got that for Christmas randomly, but it was perfect in the sense that I could sit in my room in front of my TV and just rest my arms on the desk and play all day. And it was wonderful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's funny that you mentioned going over to your friend's house to play the SNES, because that was the first 5 years of SNES existence for me, where I would like go over to my friend's house and we would play all like just whatever insane games they happen to have, right? Because the SNES has a huge library of games.
It does.
And so nobody that I knew had the same games, but I would pick up like, oh man, this person had this game. And so when I got my SNES, I had to have that game, I was picking the best games from everybody else's collections. And what was great about it was this was obviously before the internet. So you would also pick up on like, oh, I got to stay away from like Plock, oh, Bubsy is kind of a stinker, like, that sort of thing. So it was always fun to go over to somebody's house and like see what their collection looked like and try all the games that you hadn't had a chance to try.
Yeah, that's how I was with the NES. I mean, I had an NES, but I only had I think I had like 8 games or something for it because it was my brother's, and he kind of like fell out of gaming pretty quick, and so I would always go to friends' houses like, oh, you've got Mario 2? I want to play that. Like Mario 3, that's cool. Let me try, because I never had those for myself.
Yeah.
So I always played those at friends' house. So they always had different games that I had never seen before. I was like, this isn't Ninja Turtles. This is new. Let me try it.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean you would have really enjoyed coming over to my house and playing Total Recall on the NES.
I would have, because it was something I hadn't played before.
It was so fucking hard. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh man, you mentioned the large library of the SNES. Do you know how many games were released for the SNES in America?
I don't. I'm gonna guess that it's somewhere between 69 and 420.
Oh, I'm afraid you're a little bit short. It's actually 717.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. And there were something like 1,600 made in total, and there was just a bunch of shit that we never got. So
also crazy.
Yeah, that's a lot of games.
That's so many games.
Yep.
Oh, but that makes sense, because I'm forgetting about like all of the weird, like, because this was also the time frame when like sports games started coming out yearly and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, also, there was like all the Super Scope games that I never looked at, So,
yeah, I actually own the Super Scope game, but I don't own a Super Scope. I just found the cartridge in a Babbage's one time. I was like, oh, this is cool. 99 cents. Why not?
Yeah.
And I never came across a Super Scope.
I'm sure they're cheap.
Got to play them. I'm sure they are.
I'm sure they're cheap.
They've got to be super cheap, right? They've got to be only like $200. I'll let you look that up while we move on.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, the SNES was released almost 33 years ago, and things are bound to be hazy. But do you have some memories of the SNES era?
I distinctly remember the fact that I had a television that was hidden under my bed.
How does that work in the 90s?
We had an RV that had like a very small TV VCR combo in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it just stayed out there like during the school year when we weren't using our RV. And so I smuggled that shit into the house and hid it underneath my trundle bed, and then would just like everyone would go to bed, and then I'd play Super Metroid until 2 a.m. and be tired as shit for school the next day. Or I'd play the like bad Spider-Man and X-Men game that I had. And
Arcade's Revenge.
yep, and be tired as shit the next day. And yeah, so that was a distinct memory of just like laying on the shag carpet in my room. It was red and black shag carpet because the people who owned the house before us, I guess, loved Coca-Cola. It was like a Coca-Cola themed room. It was insane. We did not redecorate when I got there. I had no choice in any of this. Laying on this red and black shag carpet, getting the light and just playing SNES for so long that like the carpet would become one with my arms, and I'd like raise up my arm and the carpet pattern would be like stuck in my skin.
I know that game.
Yes, this is so good. It's amazing. Bomberman's the best.
I need to take you over to the Glitch's house.
Yeah,
because his entire kitchen is Coca-Cola themed, and I just want to see what memories it like. If you walk in and you just have this like, oh my god, flashback. I remember in like 93, I think my parents moved. And I, of course, they took me with them. We moved into the house where my parents lived just up until recently.
Okay.
And it was the first house that I'd ever lived in that had a basement.
Okay.
And so we had like a gaming area set up down there, and that's where I would hang out all the time. And I remember like summer breaks going down and just like staying up all night and renting like 2 or 3 games on the weekend and like playing Joe and Mac 2 all night and watch. And like when I was needed to take a break, just turn on Cartoon Network because I was like, I've got cable, a basement, and a Super Nintendo. What else do I need?
Right.
And I also remember for Christmas one year getting what felt like just a shit ton of games. And in reality, it was only like 3, but it felt so overwhelming when I was, little, and just all of a sudden I had all these new games. So I had like Donkey Kong Country and Super Alfred Chicken and something else that clearly wasn't memorable enough for me to remember at this moment.
Something less memorable than Super Alfred Chicken. So
look, I loved Super Alfred Chicken. All right. It was a goofy game with a weird looking chicken as the main character. But it was a lot of fun doing that. And I also remember the SNES being around the time that my brother aged out of gaming. Like he was in high school and like too cool to hang out and play video games.
Yeah.
So he would play every once in a while, and he would set these high scores and he'd think he's hot shit. But then I would also go and play those games and beat those scores and feel like a real cool guy.
Yeah, you were too. You were a very cool guy.
I remember distinctly one time beating one of his scores, and this was like early in the day. And I was like very excited. And it was like after, you get your game over and it would show your screen, like show your score at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept it on that screen and I put a piece of paper over my Super Nintendo. So if he walked in the room, he couldn't see what game I was playing, even though he could clearly look at the screen and see what it was. And I left it there so he could get home and be like, oh, you beat my score, and like have mad respect for me.
Yep.
But then he stayed out very late and I wanted to play something else. And so that never came to fruition. But man, I still think about that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you remember what game it was?
It was a game called Harley's Humongous Adventure, which I'll bring up a little bit later in the show.
Weird. Sounds real weird.
It is a weird one. But the SNES, like we mentioned, had a whole bunch of games. And IGN actually wrote an article about the top 100 SNES games of all time. And I'm not going to bore you with the painful details of numbers 11 through 100. And believe me, some of them are painful. But let's take a look at the top 10. So, starting with number 10, we have Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, Star Fox, Super Mario Kart, Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, and Street Fighter 2 Turbo at number 6. And the top 5 are Super Mario World, Final Fantasy 6/3, Super Metroid, Chrono Trigger, and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Which of these
Okay.
have you played, and how do you feel about their placement? And are there any that you feel like you missed out on that you would like to play?
Okay, so looking at this list, as I said, I did not get my Super Nintendo until 96. And so that shaped a lot of like what I was able to play, right? Because by the time I got my system, Super Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, and Final Fantasy VI, I was priced out of playing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They were already known as classics. I would like get the paper from FuncoLand that showed all the different prices, and like I'd look at them every week and like, oh man, when this one drops down to like $80, I'm gonna get it. Looking at it, and it's like $120, and it's like that's never going. That's never fucking happening. So I never got a chance to play any of those.
Yeah.
I played Star Fox around the time when it came out because one of my friends got it, and I was not a huge fan of it, if I'm being perfectly honest. Same deal with Super Mario World 2, because that, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like the cartoony aesthetic. Maybe it was the fact that Mario was a baby. It just never clicked with me, right? But outside of that, the rest of this list is like 100% all my shit, you know. Legend of Zelda, Super Metroid, Super Mario World, Street Fighter 2. I don't know about Turbo. I think we both have opinions about that. But Mario Kart was so amazing. So yeah, a lot of this list is good. Obviously, a lot of this would be very different if I were making the list for just Dale, but I get it. I understand why this is like this. What about you?
I can attest to all of these being great. The only one that I similar to you, the only one that I'm like, I don't know if it needs to be in the top 10 is Star Fox. Like Star Fox is good. It definitely holds a place. Like I think Star Fox 64 is really the one that people should be hailing more so than the Super Nintendo one. That to me is the pinnacle of the Star Fox series. But everything else is pretty solid. And in finding a list that can, I think the top 5 are you could put them in any order and any given day and you'd be correct.
Yeah.
Like those are all wonderful.
Yeah,
we've talked before about how we feel like Super Mario World is the greatest Mario game ever made, if not the greatest game ever made.
Yep.
So that being up on the list is real good. That's my favorite Zelda. Chrono Trigger is incredible. Super Metroid. I mean, we've already talked on many a podcast about how much we love that one.
Yep.
Final Fantasy VI is still my favorite Final Fantasy to this day. Like these are all great. So yeah, I would probably bump Star Fox out, and I would swap Street Fighter 2 Turbo for Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, just because that's when you get the extra characters. But you know, Street Fighter 2 Turbo is a good one. I'm not mad at it, but I think they could have given a better version of it.
Yeah, I mean DJ and Cammy, T-Hawk. Yeah. There was a fourth one, but I can't remember who that was.
Fei Long.
Fei Long, yeah.
Who was just Bruce Lee.
Yep.
Yep. So what about you? What are your personal top SNES games? I know we're gonna see Super Metroid on the list, but let's hear about some of the others that may not have been listed.
No, I want to hear your list first.
Fair enough. Well, as you could probably guess, a lot of mine are in the top 10, but some other ones that I would include in my top are Earthbound, Super Punch Out, Mega Man X, and Kirby Superstar. And I know those are all in IGN's top 100 list, but they're just in real questionable places. Earthbound is, for those of you who don't know me very well, pretty much shaped who I am today. I got that for my 10th birthday right after it came out. I remember seeing previews in Nintendo Power and like, I need this game. And I got it and absolutely loved it. Super Punch Out is one of those games that I think we've talked about before, where I've just played it to death, arguably held a world record for it, even though I never submitted it, for beating the final boss in I think it's like 7.74 seconds or something like that. I don't remember what it was now because it's just insane. But even now, like for a while, I could play through the entire first circuit of Fighters blindfolded. I love that game and figuring out the patterns and all that. And Mega Man X is just a an update on Classic, and Kirby Superstar is just, to me, the essential Kirby game. It has the original game basically built into it, great cave offensive, and just a whole bunch of other mini games. It's such a good representation of Kirby for me.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. We've got a little bit of overlap there. I loved Super Punch Out. I loved Mega Man X. Obviously, I've talked at length about Super Metroid, A Link to the Past, Super Mario World.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to note that I'd never had the Super Mario World cart. I got the Super Mario All Stars and Super Mario World cart. And so that meant that I also got to play the Lost Levels, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
Uniracers was a huge favorite of mine. Secret of Mana was a huge favorite of mine. I know we've talked about Street Fighter, but I was a big Killer Instinct fan. I thought that was great. DK Country, Donkey Kong Country, was a big one for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned it before, but NBA Hang Time. I know it's a bootleg NBA Jam. I do not care. I loved it.
I'm actually disappointed in myself for not putting Donkey Kong Country on this list. I don't know why that didn't come into mind, but yeah, that's just a great one.
Yeah. I'm really surprised it wasn't on the top 10.
Yeah, I think it was definitely in the top 20. I don't recall where I think they put Donkey Kong Country 2 over it. A lot of people tend to do that. But I think it was definitely high up in the list.
Fair.
So speaking of things that weren't in the top 10, are there any games, not just in the top 10, that you missed out or never completed that you hope to go back and play someday?
So I talked at length about all of the different RPGs that I missed.
Mm-hmm.
My secret shame is that other than Super Mario RPG, which I went back to and tried to play on an emulator like 5 years ago and it just didn't grab me. Other than that one, I have not played any of them.
Wow.
I've still not played Final Fantasy VI. I've still not played Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger, any of those.
Mm-hmm.
And it is my secret shame. I have never played Earthbound.
Man.
I tried playing Earthbound 0 because I was like, if I'm going to play Earthbound, I'm going to play through all of them, and I tried playing Earthbound 0 again on an emulator, and it was the NES. It just didn't grab me.
I wish I would have known that you did that. When it reminds me of when I worked at the video store. My boss or my regional manager was like a huge Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
And I had never seen anything Star Trek.
Okay.
And so I was like, hey man, I'm going to do it. You've talked me into it. I'm going to rent, or I rented the Chris Pine Star Trek. That was the first thing I'd ever watched. Like, that was pretty good.
I mean, it's fine, but
then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back. I'm going to watch the originals. And he's like, no, don't wait. Are you waiting? And I said, yes. And he's like, all right, do not watch the first one. Start with Wrath of Khan and then maybe go back if you want to. I was like, why shouldn't I watch from the beginning? He goes, if you watch from the beginning, you will not watch the rest. It's like, fair enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Earthbound 0 is a great game. If you have appreciation for what Earthbound was, it's by no means, it's almost like a precursor to it. A lot of the things that happen in the story have parallels to what happened in Earthbound. So I would definitely recommend giving Earthbound a shot whenever you find yourself with some time to do it.
Yeah.
And I can always, there are different like play guides of like, hey, if you only want to play X amount of time a day, like try to meet these goals and look for these goofy things. I can recommend some of those if you just want to find a way to, interestingly get around to it. But man,
yeah,
I feel like Earthbound and Chrono Trigger, if you like role playing games, give those a shot. I think you can get Chrono Trigger on your Steam Deck. I don't know how great that version is, but it's still a version of it and it's incredible. So man, do it. Those games.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me, by the way, because you talked about like if you like RPGs, like one game I forgot to shout out in addition to Secret of Mana was Secret of Evermore, which when I was a kid, I was like, oh, they're both secret games.
Right. No, they must be related.
They're not related at all, but they're both very good. So, yeah. What about you? What games did you miss out on?
I'm sorry. Hang on.
I forgive you.
Do you hear that?
No.
I feel like I can hear Ganon screaming Terranigma.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one that I should probably play. I know my buddy Craig also really enjoys that one. It was never released in the US officially, but anybody I've talked to has just gone on about how great it was. I think Clay actually streamed a good chunk of it online and seemed
I
to
think he
enjoy it.
beat it on his stream. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it kind of looks like a well, I guess more Illusion of Gaia style game, which that's another one that needs to be shouted out if you like action RPGs.
Mhm.
That's a real good one. So Terranigma is one that I feel like I need to go back and play. I don't think I ever finished Donkey Kong Country 3 and probably should at some time, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's diminishing returns. Kirby's Dream Land 3 is another one that I've started a few times, especially it's on the Nintendo Switch Online.
Yeah.
And I always start it when I'm really tired, and I always just kind of like stop playing it after the first couple of levels. So
Yeah.
but
That's fair.
yeah, I feel like I should, some of those Kirby games I should go back and play. But then I like will start playing them, and I'm either tired or I'm like, you know what else I should play? It's Kirby Superstar, and that takes over my life for a while.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kirby
Well,
games are great.
they are. And we could gush all day about popular games on the SNES, but what are some overlooked gems, or at least games that you liked that maybe weren't so popular for the SNES?
Okay, so I have already mentioned it once this episode, but I maintain that Uniracers is, if not the best, one of the best split screen racing games of all time. It is absolutely amazing. The way it conveys information to you is amazing. The sense of speed that you get is amazing. The like playfulness that it has is amazing. I absolutely love Uniracers. I don't think you will ever be able to play it on any, like, it's never going to be re-released or anything like that,
Right.
because I'm pretty sure they got sued by Pixar. I can't remember, but I think that was the deal. But Uniracers was amazing, and if you have the chance to try it, you should try it. I also want to give a shout out to a little fighting game called Primal Rage, because in a world where you've got a new fighting game coming out with, like, all these cool badass characters that are in Killer Instinct, or all these like stone cold killers in Mortal Kombat, or all of these like larger than life beings that are in Street Fighter, what fighting game hole needs to be filled? Of course it's dinosaurs.
Yep. It's the 90s. We need dinosaurs.
We need badly stop motion dinosaurs.
Mhm.
We need 5 or 6 frames a second animated dinosaurs.
Yep.
And it was just an absolutely wild dinosaur fighting game. One of the characters was an ape, and you would think he would be overpowered, what with, humans outlasting dinosaurs or whatever. Nah, he was fine. But it was just, it's the sort of game that when you look back on it, you're like, is that real?
Yeah.
Was it? And it was. It was real. You'll notice I'm not saying you should play it. I just want everyone to know that it exists.
Yeah. And it's sort of in the same vein of stop motion clay animated. We also need to bring up Clay Fighters. Needs to be mentioned.
Yes.
I don't think we need a modern one. I know there was a tease that there was going to be one for a while, but those games so perfectly reflect the time that they were from, and they're such goofy, fun games. You had like Bad Mr. Santa or something like that. Like it was just no Sumo Santa. That's what it was. It was Bad Mr. Frosty and Sumo Santa. Just a fat Santa wearing very little clothing that you would fight with. There was one that was just a blob, and it was just a blob of clay.
I remember the Elvis character.
Yep. I can't remember what his name was, but I'm gonna be sitting here all day trying to remember what it was. There was Taffy, which was just a rubber guy, and man, now I'm forgetting all of these things. But it's just a goofy Helga. Yep, that was one of them.
Yep. Oh, the Elvis one. I'm on the wiki now, so I'm cheating. But the Elvis one was called Blue Suede Goo.
Blue Suede Goo. I knew it was something like that. It was a pun on one of the songs.
Yep.
But yeah, they're just really goofy. And they even just, when they brought the one out for Nintendo 64, so there was Clay Fighters 2 Judgment Clay, And then in an era where everything was called name of game 64, they brought out Clay Fighter 63 and a third. And
Yep.
that was just incredibly, it just still makes me laugh to this day.
So good.
And there was another game that I mentioned earlier in the episode, Harley's Humongous Adventure, which is just a platformer about a kid who gets shrunk down and has to navigate his house. So all the everyday normal things just look gigantic, and you're running around fighting people with nails and stuff like that. It's dumb. I don't think it's particularly a very good game, but I remember playing it a lot when I was a kid. It's like, this seems interesting. Why not? They also had a game. The people who made Clay Fighters is a company called Interplay.
Yep.
They made another game called Claymates, which is actually available on Nintendo Switch Online, if I'm not mistaken.
I remember Claymates.
And it was you were a boy who was turned into a clay ball, and that was like you were a platformer, and then you could find these little upgrades that would turn you into different animals. And it's just a dumb platformer, but they were like, hey, we've got these graphics that we can use to talk or to look like clay animation. We should just roll with it and make this whole new game. And so that was another thing they did. Any further gushing you want to do about the SNES before we get to our sponsored question?
I mean, honestly, I could talk about the SNES for like ever. I think what's interesting about the SNES is it was a game where there was a system where the games were relatively expensive, and yet for some reason every company was willing to take insane chances on this game or on the system, right? Like, so either the markups on the games were super crazy high, or you could like be guaranteed a certain amount of revenue from like rental stores and stuff like that. Like, I do not know how a lot of companies survived the Super NES era. When you look back on like Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball was a launch title for the SNES. It was a top-down basketball fighting game. Like, what? Like, actually what? Like, totally insane. All of that said, it holds up still because it was sprite-based for the most part.
Yeah.
And so you can go back and any of these classic games that we've talked about, you can play them and not have your eyeballs bleed like you would if you were going back and playing like early PS1 games, for instance.
Nintendo 64.
Yeah, exactly. Like none of those games held up, but because the SNES was sprite based, pretty much everything holds up. I also don't think that gaming would be where it is today without the SNES, right? Like, there's a million different games that game genres that got started on the SNES that wouldn't exist without it. And also the SNES, we talked about them taking chances with games. They also took chances with some of the peripherals, and we joked about the Super Scope earlier because it's like, yeah, haha, that one kind of fell like on its face. But the SNES also had the multi-tap, which allowed you to play 4-player games on it. And that ruled. That was one of the best gaming inventions of all time. So good, in fact, that on every system from then on, they were just like, yeah, 4 controller ports. That's the standard, man. That's just what we're doing. So absolutely amazing when it comes to like the innovation behind the system, some of the games that were on that system. And like you don't see, maybe this is just like recency bias, but I don't think in modern consoles you see as high of an average quality of game as you did on the SNES. You know, like, we had a ton of fucking games, but so much of it was shovelware. And the same is true on basically every system since. If you take a look at like the online storefront on the Switch, like, there's a million garbage games that have been released for like $1 or whatever. The average quality of the SNES game was very, very high. So,
where there was 717 and probably a good 400 to 500 of them were good.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, I'll echo the sentiment of how just hugely inspirational the SNES is. And a lot of it might be like, just it's the life cycle of the system, or the life cycle of just gaming in general. And so early stuff, of course, is going to be hailed as some of the greatest.
Mhm.
But I mean, Super Metroid is arguably responsible for the popularity of Metroidvanias today.
I mean, we didn't even talk about Super Castlevania.
Right?
Yeah.
Which was still a level based thing. Like, it wasn't the like
Mhm.
go backtrack and like find all this stuff and find all these secrets and explore, like of what we think of as modern day Metroidvanias.
Yeah.
Earthbound, like I mentioned, is a huge cult hit that inspired countless indie titles like Undertale and Omori. Like any kind of like quirky, funny RPG has Earthbound to thank for it existing.
Yeah.
Harvest Moon started on the SNES, and then now we have like Stardew Valley and 1,000 other farming and life sim style games, and that all started on the SNES. And so it's just crazy to think about that. And you mentioned the multi tap, which absolutely I've meant to say something, but like going into my local rental shop and seeing this gigantic box for Super Bomberman and wondering why it's so fucking big, only to find out that it's a way that I can play with 3 friends at the same time. That made birthday, like, that was the thing for my birthday parties growing up. Like,
Yeah.
I need to go to the store and find as many games that can use the multi tap, and we're gonna
We're gonna rent them
Super
and have
Bomberman.
an awesome party.
Yep, I remember I always did Super Bomberman, and a buddy of mine would always play Lord of the Rings for SNES, and it use the multi tap as well.
Okay.
And I was like, Lord of the Rings, that sounds like some stupid stuff. And I never played, but I always waited for them to play Bomberman.
We always use the multi-tap to play because I've got a brother and a younger brother and a younger sister. And so we would play Secret of Mana, which with the multi-tap, you could play 3 players. And it just so happened that the main character was an older boy, and then there was a girl and a boy. And so it worked out perfect for us. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing you talked about games that inspired whole genres. If it weren't for EVO, Search for Eden, we wouldn't have had Spore, right?
It's true.
Like, there's a bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, fighting games kind of really like home fighting games that was one of the things that made the Super Nintendo so popular, was like, oh, we've got Final Fight. This game that you could play in the arcade is now playable at home. Like,
Yeah.
It brought a whole, I mean, Nintendo already kind of revolutionized that, and then Super Nintendo just kind of solidified like, hey, home console gaming is a thing, and it's going to be here to stay. And so I think a lot of modern day gaming has that system to thank for it. You know, just being able to know what kind of power, we're playing with superpower for Christ's sake. Like, it was their main thing, is like, now you're playing with power, superpower.
Yeah. Oh man, it was so good.
It is. It really is. If you didn't have a Super Nintendo, I'm sorry for you, but I'm also like, you can play it. You can still get a lot of these games because so many of them have been re-released. And that's a testament just how great they are and how well they've stood the test of time.
Yeah, except for the Super Scope, because I looked that up on eBay, and that son bitch is like $200 in box.
That's what I said. It was $200. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm so smart and handsome and modest.
Yeah. Apparently, you can get one no box, no manual, no game, but it's tested and working for like $90.
That's still pretty expensive for a thing that only had like 3 games.
But you have the game, so
that's true. I've got the Super Scope 6 game but I don't have Yoshi's Safari. So what's the point?
Fair enough.
Oh, well, that brings us to our last question, and it's a sponsored question. Sponsored by Gaming D-Makes, taking games that were kind of okay and turning them into a retro style greatness. If you could take a modern game and turn it into an SNES game, which would you choose? And would it work well? Or would it be a terrible idea that you try just to see how bad it is and then trick your friends into playing it?
I didn't consider the last half of this about like a bad game to trick my friends into. I just figured like, what modern game would I love to see in a 16-bit style? And like what storyline would be like the craziest to come across in the SNES? And so I want a wild top-down demake of Cyberpunk 2077.
Interesting.
I think that the 16-bit sprite style and the over-the-top gore would be great It would be similar to like what you see in like a Hotline Miami, for instance, but
Mhm.
not as twitchy, you know. The hacking games that are in there, the hacking mini games they already have like a little bit of that 16-bit aesthetic. So those would work fine. I would love to see a storyline as dark and gritty as that on the Super NES. So I think it would actually work pretty well. And the driving in Cyberpunk sucked, and the driving in pretty much every top-down SNES game sucked. So it would work. It would work perfectly.
Well, I don't know if it counts as modern. And I'm realizing this, now that I'm like looking back on my answer here. And I put Guitar Hero with an SNES style music, like cover, like Rock and Roll Racing, how they had like classic songs that were redone in that style.
Yep.
And I think it would be not good to play. I can't imagine it working very well. But I think it'd be a dope ass soundtrack. And then as I tried to think of other actually modern games that might be good, my mind went to, I'd like to see BioShock made as like a side scrolling thing. I was like, oh shit, BioShock is also like 15 years old. So I guess I just don't know what modern means.
Yeah. Yeah. There were a bunch of games that I thought of that, like, could you imagine something like Inscription on the SNES?
That'd be crazy.
Where it's just like, oh, what is this, or like any of those like games that subvert your thought process. Like imagine Frog Fractions on the SNES,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, all right, it's an edutainment game, and then like all of a sudden you're underwater and you're like doing all, and then it's a text-based adventure, and then it's like Frog Fractions on the SNES. I changed my mind. That's what I want. I want Frog Fractions.
You caught me in the middle of a yawn with that, so I saw like if you're wondering what that sound was, that was a yawn laugh.
I thought it was you being 70 years old and laughing.
It was a laughing
Oh
yawn.
man. Yeah. So
Um,
Frog Fractions. Also, if you haven't played Frog Fractions,
I haven't.
it's
I didn't even know what
online.
you're talking about.
Oh my god, you would love it. It's insane. Yeah, you should definitely check out Frog Fractions.
Fair enough. Another one that came to mind, and this is like just a goofy answer, is I'd want to see something like Gravity Circuit go on the SNES. It's already a retro
Mm,
style game, but just see how like rough it would be on the SNES.
okay.
Just to make me appreciate the modern version so much more.
Just so you're aware, Frog Fractions Game of the Decade edition is available for free on Steam.
Okay, well, I guess I will do that next.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we know that Frog Factions can be found on Steam. Where can you be found?
Ooh, what a great segue, sir. You can find me on Blue Sky, just shit posting the night away, and also in the Discord, doing much the same. And my name on both of those platforms is a 20-sided ninja. You can also check me out, like, friend me on Steam. If we ain't Steam friends, like, I want to know when you're playing Balatro, because I'm also playing Balatro. So hit me up on Steam. I'm a
There you go.
20-sided ninja there too.
I am Zando in the Discord, and that's where I'm the most active. You'll find traces of me on Blue Sky, as I think I posted once 2 or 3 months ago. But I'm on there if you want to just say, "Oh, hey, I'm friends with Zando on Blue Sky." You can do it. But mostly, if you want interaction, it's in the Discord.
Are
And
the "Oh Hey, I'm Friends with Zando on Blue Sky" T-shirts sold out still, or
yes, yeah, they are on back order.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, how can it possibly take? The UT puts out new shirts every damn day. How do we not have these back in stock yet?
Yeah.
But, you know what else you can do in the Discord is we have our Let's Be Friends channel where you can be friends on Steam if you want to do there.
It's true.
And there's also our voice channels where we hang out all the time. We're watching movies sometimes. We're playing games almost every night. You can also just hop in the general channel and say, fuck you, Dan, if you want to. There's lots of things you can do in the Discord.
I'd recommend it. In fact, if you're listening to this and you haven't yet said "fuck you, Dan" in the Discord, you could tag him. His name is Auron, Auron. So go ahead and tag him in the Discord. Let's see what happens.
Just a big old "fuck you, Dan" in the general, please. And everyone who does it will get a free episode next week.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be the same one as everyone else, but
It's for
do it.
you. Just know. You'll know.
Yep, you'll know. It'll be no one else will know but you and us and everybody.
There's that damn cough.
Well, at least
I almost made it through. God
at least
damn
it wasn't
Xander.
a laughing yawn and made you sound like a 90-year-old man.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of the episode. And if you're still listening, thank you for listening. And I'm going to drop it. That's a dumb bit. But we hope you have a super okay day. And we'll see you later. Say bye to everybody.
Goodbye, everybody. Old man voice just fucking got me, man.